My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at Owen's phone, the bright screen searing the horrific truth into my mind. The messages were unmistakable, sweet nothings and explicit details that could only be meant for one person, his lover. "Hey babe, can't wait to take you out tonight. I've got a surprise planned." I felt the blood drain from my face as reality crashed down upon me. My husband, my partner of 12 years, was having an affair. The phone slipped from my trembling hands as a tidal wave of emotions threatened to drown me. Shock, anger, devastation. I'm not sure how long I sat there, numb and motionless, before the sound of Nathan's laughter from the backyard jarred me back to the present. Taking a deep, shuddering breath, I willed my racing thoughts into focus. I couldn't confront Owen, not yet. This required a more calculated response. Retrieving his phone, I quickly deleted the damning thread, removing any trace of my discovery. No, Owen would not get off that easily. If he thought he could betray me and simply walk away, he was gravely mistaken. My mind whirred as the initial panic gave way to cold determination. I knew what I had to do. First, I needed evidence, concrete proof to dismantle every lie he would inevitably try to spin. Second, I required a plan to secure mine and Nathan's future, protecting us from the fallout of his reprehensible actions. I dialed the only person I could trust with such a weight. "Ella? It's me. We need to talk." By the time Owen returned home that evening, my game face was firmly in place. I smiled and played the doting wife, all while mentally cataloging his every move, his every casual lie. He would soon learn that betrayal came at a cost, and I intended to make him pay dearly. Over the next few days, I kept my ears priced for any information that could aid my cause, maintaining a cool front despite the storm of fury raging within. Scouring his emails, texts, and any other electronic trails, I slowly pieced together the sordid details of his affair, my hatred for this Jenna intensifying with every revelation. I also began meticulously documenting his indiscretions, ensuring I left no stone unturned. Legal counsel, separate bank accounts, updated beneficiaries, no precaution was too small in securing a future for Nathan and myself, free from Owen's corrosive influence. With Ella's assistance, I bided my time, allowing Owen to slip further into the web of his own lies as his actions grew more brazen. All the while, I steadily constructed an impenetrable case against him, turning his selfish misdeeds against him. One way or another, he would atone for his sins. Soon, the veil of deceit would be lifted, and only then would Owen comprehend the true consequences of betraying the person who knew him best. The day of reckoning was coming, and I would be ready. Over the next few weeks, I worked methodically to reshape our routines, gradually removing any ties that could impede a clean break from Owen. Little by little, I redirected finances into a secure account, paid down joint debts, and revised legal documents. I even switched Nathan to a new school, one closer to Ella's house, just in case. Owen, the oblivious fool, remained utterly clueless to the approaching storm. His arrogance left an increasingly blatant trail of evidence, received gifts inexplicably appearing around the house, furtive phone calls at all hours, shady rendezvous disguised as working late. I diligently catalogued every infraction, every despicable transgression. One afternoon, I caught him in the act, hunched over his laptop, having what he thought was a private video call. "You'll never guess what I have planned for this weekend, baby." He purred in that sickly sweet tone that made my skin crawl. "A cozy little bed and breakfast up in the mountains, just you and me." I pressed record on my phone, allowing his tawdry words to permanently etch his deceit before clearing my throat loudly. Owen startled, panic flashing across his face as he scrambled to minimize the window. Too late, I had bore witness to the truth yet again. "Oh, hey, hon." He feigned an innocent smile. "Just a work call. You know how it is." Rather than confront his pathetic lie, I simply quirked an eyebrow and strolled away, anger simmering beneath my calm veneer. Let him leave the increasingly transparent trail. It would only further damn him when I deployed my reckoning. A new fire lit within me as I doubled down on my efforts. I knew the law would side with the wronged spouse, especially with the cache of evidence I had diligently compiled, but it never hurt to stock more ammunition. With Ella's help, I left no stone unturned, drilling into Owen's email accounts, financial records, anywhere even the faintest trace of impropriety may lurk. And lurk it did. Jenna's name appeared again and again, a scarlet A woven through loan applications, withdrawals, even several Negley employees' reports that Ella managed to unearth. Piece by piece, I unraveled the tapestry of lies he so carefully attempted to shroud, revealing their affair for the umbrella of selfish deception it truly was. Meanwhile, Owen's behavior at home grew more erratic, more careless. Perhaps sensing the calm before the storm, he seemed determined to cram in as much debauchery as possible. I lost count of the evenings he stumbled in late, reeking of that trashy perfume, or the hushed phone calls held in parked cars. It was almost insultingly blatant. Through it all, I maintained a veneer of plausible deniability, tenderly caring for Nathan while shrouding my intentions behind a facade of wifely naivety. Let Owen openly frolic with his mistress. It would only make the sting of his consequence more brutal and well-deserved. Part of me couldn't wait to obliterate the life he thought he knew, to crush every bit of shameless arrogance that allowed him to so brazenly spit in the face of our vows. Soon the predator would become the prey, his infidelity dissected and upended for all to see the ugly, selfish core lurking underneath. I knew the road ahead would be painful, that curveballs and complications surely loomed just out of sight. But I refused to go down as the meek, jilted wife weeping from the sidelines. No, Owen's betrayal required a firmer hand, and I would be the one to deliver his penance with surgical, unwavering precision. Licking my wounds in private, I steadied my nerves and hardened my resolve. Judgment awaited, and I would be its ultimate arbiter. As the weeks ticked by, more layers of Owen's deception began to unspool. Diving into our financial records, I discovered he had been steadily siphoning funds from our joint accounts into a separate, hidden stash. Thousands of dollars, drained to bankroll his escapes with that vile woman. The sheer audacity of it made my blood boil. Not only was he betraying my trust in the most unconscionable way, but he was robbing from our family's future, from Nathan's potential inheritance, to fund his deplorable indulgences. I felt utterly violated. Thankfully, I had kept meticulous documentation of every fishy transaction, every bit of evidence that could be leveraged against him. With Ella's guidance, I began quietly setting up my own off-the-books account, diverting what I could salvage to ensure a stable financial future for Nathan and myself, independent of Owen's selfishness. Ironic, I thought bitterly, that he would inadvertently teach me such an invaluable lesson about contingency planning. As if his monetary depravity despicable enough, I soon uncovered an even more gut-wrenching layer of Owen's betrayal. Amidst my impassive surveillance of his communications, I came across a galling string of messages between him and Jenna, each more repulsive than the last. "You know this can't go on forever, right?" Her artificially sweet words practically oozed through the screen. "If you ever want us to have a real future, you need to do the right thing and leave that family of yours behind." My heart plummeted into my stomach as I absorbed the full extent of her arrogant, cold-blooded manipulation. So that was her insidious game. She hadn't just set her predatory sights on snagging Owen for a fleeting dalliance, but had been systematically working to obliterate our entire lives. The worst part was, his responses seemed to be tacitly encouraging her suggestions. In that moment, I was gripped by an overwhelming protectiveness over Nathan. I refused to allow that shriveled snake of a woman to slither her way into destroying the sanctity of his childhood, of the life and values I had so lovingly nurtured. If she wanted a battle, she had just initiated a war she could never hope to win. I redoubled my efforts, drilling down on every last intersection of their sordid involvement. Deleted messages, calendar invites, receipts, all betraying a torrid breadcrumb trail deliberately hidden in plain sight, as though Owen reveled in parading his indiscretions behind my back. With Ella's assistance, I began compiling it all into an ironclad damning dossier, one that would ensure I emerged victorious. Meanwhile, as Owen's duplicity intensified, so did my efforts to lovingly insulate Nathan from the turmoil lurking under our roof. We spent quality time together each day, baking, doing arts and crafts, lavishing in the simplicities of the mother-son bond. Deep down, I drew strength from his innocence, from the bright future I was determined to preserve on his behalf. "Mom, can we go camping this summer?" Nathan asked one afternoon, all smiles and unbridled hope. "You, me and Dad?" My heart clenched at the thought of Owen tainting such a special tradition with his perverse dishonesty. Forcing a reassuring smile, I pulled my sweet boy close. "Of course we can, baby," I murmured into his hair. "Maybe somewhere extra special, just you and me." Owen couldn't be allowed to tarnish Nathan's horizons any longer. As his transgressions piled up, so did the fortifications around the family he had shattered beyond repair. Guided by Ella's pragmatism and my own unflappable discipline, I arised the art of sustainable vengeance, quietly assembling the battle plan that would neutralize every last threat he posed. Our future security was nearing weight off the deceptive life he had so recklessly constructed. Once the dust settled, Nathan and I would emerge vibrant and victorious, utterly insulated from the toxicity of Owen's rebounding misery. Soon, all would be laid bare, and that wretched mistress of his would learn the steep price for ruining the sanctity of my family. With my defenses solidifying, it was time to take the offensive. I knew divorce proceedings would be inevitable, so I began consulting with a ferocious bulldog of a lawyer that Ella recommended. Sitting across from her imposing desk, I methodically laid out the comprehensive paper trail, documenting every last one of Owen's indiscretions. "I want to pursue an at-fault divorce on grounds of adultery," I stated flatly. "He needs to be held fully accountable." The lawyer's eyes widened as she examined the mountain of evidence: hard numbers, screenshots, incriminating images. Finally, she let out a low whistle of impressed disbelief. "With a case file like this, he won't know what hit him," she stated grimly. "We'll bleed him dry." Her cold calculation was strangely reassuring. For too long, I had been at the mercy of Owen's betrayal. Now I would be the one dictating his misery. Meanwhile, Ella had been working her own angles to demolish the worm's life on a professional level. Through her investigative prowess, she uncovered an insidious pattern surrounding his mistress, a systematic seduction of married colleagues from the bottom rungs all the way to upper management. Jenna wasn't just a callous homewrecker, she was a calculating workplace huntress. Armed with undeniable proof of her penchant for unscrupulous affairs, Ella began feeding anonymous tips to her employer's human resources department. Suddenly, the veneer of professionalism that Jenna had so carefully maintained began to disintegrate before her. I could only imagine the fear that started lacing Owen's messages to his mistress as gathering storm clouds of scrutiny began closing in on their indiscretion. Would he finally start to feel the shred of anxiety, the paralyzing uncertainty that I had been forced to endure for months? How delicious it would be to watch his world slowly implode while remaining utterly powerless to undo his own vile undoing. I refused to simply sit back and gloat, however. With the lawyer's guidance, I pressed forward in surgically separating myself from any legal or financial liability stemming from Owen's recklessness. Name was to be stripped from property titles, accounts relisted under just my name, every entanglement cauterized with precise intention. Like a gifted angler, I indelicately removed every barb and hook he had carelessly strewn across my life, one squirming tug at a time. "Don't leave any strings dangling," the lawyer warned. "He'll try desperately to bleed you dry as leverage, so cut off all potential sources." I just smirked back at her, utterly undaunted. That foolish man had already revealed the boundless depths of his depravity, his staggering capacity for selfishness and indulgent stupidity. Did he really think I would blink at his pathetic intimidation tactics now? Oh, how exquisite his underestimation would be. Every day, it seemed, unearthed a new layer of Owen's perfidy for me to coldly dismantle. The shady real estate holdings, mail-order dalliances, messy digital footprint, all irreversibly preserved as damning exhibits in his upcoming humiliation. With each dossier I compiled, each revelation of deceit and betrayal, my appetite for retribution grew insatiably ravenous. He simply had no idea what sort of Pyrrhic victory he had unleashed upon himself. Fool that he was, he could never fathom the depths of my capacity for determination or discipline. Where he remained pathetically encapsulated by the incessant neediness of his cowardly id, I was rapidly evolving into an unstoppable force of nature, a consummate, merciless juggernaut of wrath. I would become the arbiter through which all of his despicable transgressions would finally and irrevocably be judged. As Owen remained blessedly clueless to the swirling vortex of exposure rapidly encircling him, I continued preparing the pieces for our fateful reckoning with practiced calculation. Let him wallow obliviously in his cesspool of lust and faithlessness a while longer. The phantom freedom he was deludedly indulging would prove all the more suffocating once I fully seized the reins of his torment. His future belonged to me now, as much as he had willfully orphaned himself from mine, and the path ahead for him was looking increasingly unavoidably bleak. With each passing week, the tsunami of Owen's consequence gathered more unstoppable momentum. The HR complaints against him and his mistress had bloomed into a full-fledged corporate scandal, with whispers and dark looks trailing their every move through the office halls. "I can't believe we've been working alongside those kinds of people," I overheard a coworker mutter in hushed tones. "It's just sordid." Owen may have remained oblivious to the rapidly disintegrating ground beneath his feet, but there was no masking Jenna's increasingly frantic demeanor. I watched with perverse satisfaction as the weight of her self-inflicted ruin seemed to physically age her before my eyes. "This is spiraling out of control," her text to Owen became increasingly shrill. "We need to get ahead of this now." "Relax, babe. It's just office gossip," he attempted to soothe her, the smug dismissiveness in his words stoking my hatred. "I'll smooth everything over. Just keep your head down." The arrogant delusion was almost pitiable. Owen remained utterly blind, like an obliviously cheery denizen wandering into the heart of a steadily encroaching minefield. Any day now, his world would detonate in an apocalyptic deluge, decades of deceit and selfishness finally withering under their own morally indefensible weight. While he buried his head in the sand, I continued systematically dismantling every last lifeline that could possibly serve to buoy his retreat. One by one, through calculated-rized planning and Ella's expert assistance, the few friends or family members who may have provided shelter from the coming storm found themselves gradually, neutrally estranged. Like a twisted, violent magic trick, I made his entire world silently dematerialize around him, all without lifting a finger towards direct confrontation. Having thoroughly excised Owen's cancerous influence from my life, I turned to focusing on preparing Nathan for the seismic shifts ahead. Though still painfully unaware of the grotesque betrayal unfolding around him, my son had become increasingly unsettled by the underlying tensions now frayed our once idyllic home life. Evening meals were spent shooting me questioning looks while his father hurriedly choked down food. Outings felt increasingly strained and awkward, like wool being pulled over our eyes. "Is everything okay with Dad?" Nathan finally asked one night as I tucked him in, his brow furrowed with childhood worry. "He seems different lately." Steadying myself, I stroked his soft cheek and offered my most reassuring smile. "Everything's just fine, baby," I soothed, surprised at my own believability. "Grown-ups go through some changes sometimes, that's all, but you'll always have me, no matter what." My son seemed to accept the placation, snuggling deeper into his blankets with a relieved nod, but his words cemented my determination to steel him for the unavoidable turbulence that loomed ahead. For too long, Owen had been eroding the steadfast center I had fought to keep our nuclear family intact and happy. It was finally time to excise that malignancy. Over the following days, I took great care to lavish Nathan with affection and quality time, striving to create joyful memories that could fortify him through the trials ahead. We went for nature walks, visited museums, rewatched all his favorite movies nestled on the couch, anything to insulate him in a warm domesticity wholly segregated from his father's self-inflicted turmoil. All the while, I could practically feel the crosshairs of impending confrontation slowly fixing themselves on Owen's oblivious form. Like the peak of a terrifying roller coaster's first dip, we were nearly suspended at the calm before the plunging maelstrom, the decisive reckoning which he had unconscionably forced to this point. I had assembled an overwhelmingly damning dossier of evidence, stripping away every layer of his depravity through documentation and cold pragmatism, restraining orders, asset protections, childcare provisions. Nothing was left unfortified for the coming siege of his unleashed mania. All that remained was to deftly lure Owen into the kill zone, then riddle him with the merciless barrage of justice he had brought up-rakening upon himself. Scattered amidst the zeal of my preparations, I caught flashes of the woman I had once been, tempted to abandon this increasingly dark path out of some withering self-preservation. But they never lasted. My identity was permanently arc-welded to this white-hot meta-wingedity and finality of purpose. There could be no equivocation, no half-measures remaining, only a sudden, blinding dawn terminating this wretched season of deception, paving the way for the hard-won renaissance awaiting for Nathan and myself. Owen's day of judgment had nearly arrived, and I was ready. With the final pieces locked into place, I summoned Owen home for our inevitable reckoning, a terse text demanding his presence. He likely assumed I wanted to rehash marriage counseling or some other fruitless attempt at reconciliation. Little did he know I had long abandoned any notion of preserving our lawfully wedded privation. When he finally sauntered through the door, I was seated stoically in the living room, a thick manila folder containing his compendium of sins resting coolly on the coffee table before me. As instructed, Nathan was safely ensconced at Ella's for the evening. This fallout would be far too toxic for young eyes to witness. "Hey, Hon, you wanted to see me?" Owen's voice held a twinge of confusion as he made his way towards me, seemingly oblivious to the gravity of the situation. With a steely glare, I slid the dossier across the table towards his approaching form. "You might want to take a look at this first." The instant his fingers opened the folder, dread instantly washed over his features, panic seizing his body. For several torturous moments, my husband rifled through the damning evidence with shaking hands, incriminating photos, blasphemous texts, philanthropist money trails. Every dirty secret, every web of adulterous malfeasance I had so meticulously compiled over these agonizing months, all finally laid bare before his ashen face. "Lila," he finally sputtered, eyes brimming with pathetic, unshed tears. "I don't know what to say." "Don't bother," I coldly interjected, unmoved by his woebegone theatrics. "Your actions have spoken volumes already. I'm done playing pretend, done swallowing the lies. Our marriage is over." The words seemed to slap him in the face, his jaw going slack with dismay. Good, let him marinate in the consequences of his selfish treachery for once. "But you can't be serious," Owen blubbered in disbelief. "After everything we've been through, we can work this out. I know we can. Just tell me what you need, Lila. I'll do anything." I gave a derisive snort at the absurdity of his blustering, utterly unmoved by his sniveling pleas. "You've already shown me exactly what you're willing to do. Lie, cheat, steal, utterly betray the very sanctity of our vows without a single shred of remorse, all to indulge your tawdry fling with that viper of a woman." My words hung heavy in the air, both of us fully aware that I was referring to his mistress, Jenna. His momentary hesitation said it all. Pathetically, his first instinct had been to attempt disassociation from her, the cowardly worm. "That's over. I swear," he backpedaled, desperation mounting. "Completely, totally finished. This was all a massive mistake. You have to know that." "A mistake?" My voice was a razor at his throat. "You don't get to play revisionist with your ugly, drawn-out patterns of infidelity and depravity, Owen. You made your bed, woven tightly with deceit and moral atrocity. Now you get to lie in it." On cue, punctuating the finality of my statement, the front door creaked open and my lawyer entered, manila folders clutched in her manicured grasp. She stalked over and deposited them squarely on the table next to the teetering stacks of Owen's documented sins. "Mr. Hendricks, I'd suggest carefully reviewing and signing where indicated," she intoned professionally. "Mrs. Hendricks has secured a very thorough judgment on your behavior." Owen gaped like a fish, frantically flipping through the sheafs of legalese as tears began to openly flow down his crumbling face. Every protection, every contingency crafted during my Praguing exit strategy now fell ruinously into place around his buckling form. It was beautiful, utterly vindicating justice. This can't be happening," he whispered numbly, Pelagian at the sheer immensity of his forfeiture. Finances, property, probably even custody if I pressed based on his philandering rap sheet. His shattered eyes finally lifted to meet my own, perhaps for the first time in years, truly seeing the remorseless diamond-plated version of the woman he had so carelessly betrayed. In that moment, I allowed every last acrid plume of rage and disgust I felt towards him to bore into his shrinking soul. "Start getting used to your new reality, Owen," I spoke softly, each word dripping avec menace. "This is the bed you've made. and I'm just getting started in returning that favor. In the days following my explosive confrontation with Owen, a strange, almost giddy calm settled over me. As I watched him desperately attempt to untangle the legal straitjacket I had so tightly bound him in, I felt utterly at peace, like a skilled surgeon having cleanly excised a malignant toxicity. "This is outrageous," he railed to my lawyer during one meeting, motioning wildly at the divorce terms. "You can't just take everything. What about my career? What am I supposed to do?" The shark-eyed attorney barely batted an eye. "Frankly, Mr. Hendricks, you should count yourself lucky you haven't been charged with criminal misconduct, given the evidence. I'd suggest complying and avoiding any unpleasant escalations." Unable to restrain my satisfaction, I allowed a faint smirk to crease my lips as the impotent bluster drained from Owen's face. I'd handpicked this aggressive legal Rottweiler for her reputation in devouring entitled adulterers. Let him choke on the bitter taste of his abject humiliation for once. While he flailed and floundered in a desperate bid for basic traction, I focused my energies on more positive pursuits, namely ensuring a smooth transition for Nathan. With gentle age-appropriate conversations, I steadily ushered him through the realities of our new reality, careful to insulate him from any unnecessary toxicity. "Daddy has made some grown-up mistakes," I explained carefully, cradling my son close. "Ones that mean we won't be living together as a family anymore. But you'll always have me, and I'll always keep you safe and happy. I promise." To his immense credit, Nathan seemed to accept the situation with surprising grace and resilience. Perhaps the underlying frictions in our home had been more transparent than I'd hoped. In any case, with the cancerous influence of Owen's toxicity expunged, I could already sense my son's lightening spirit, unshackled from the poisoned air he had been unwittingly inhaling for far too long. As for Owen, his pathetic attempts at reconciliation and mercy fell on deafened ears. I caught glimpses of his mewling voicemails, increasingly anguished texts pleading to meet, reeking of desperation, but I simply forwarded them to my lawyer, refusing to indulge his predictable histrionics for even a moment. He had chosen to selfishly discard any goodwill or decency between us. Now he could drown in the withering consequences. On the work front, Owen's life continued its inexorable implosion as his seamy conduct rapidly became laughingstock of the office. I almost pitied the wretch when Ella shared footage of him being perp-walked out of his workplace, cardboard box overflowing with personal items and millennial career relics clutched limply to his chest. Jenna could be seen slinking off in the background in a paroxysm of self-inflicted embarrassment. "You're finally getting what you deserve," Ella told me with a satisfied nod. "Both of you miserable snakes." I merely shrugged, suddenly self-conscious of the depth of my friend's loyalty. Truthfully, I held no grudge against Jenna anymore. Her petty, shriveled existence had already transformed into its own searing punishment, her prospects permanently cauterized by the wildfire of scandal she helped spark in her singular lust and weakness. Owen, however, he would never escape the full, crippling weight of my disdain and fury. Not until his dying day, spent groveling through the rubble of all he had destroyed through his arrogance and weakness, I would gleefully ensure it. With each passing milestone, the house transferred to my name, Owen's unceremonious loss of custody and privileges, his reputation left a smoldering crater of scandal. The vice around his flailing existence only tightened. The man I had once loved, the father of my precious child, had willfully transformed into an amoral, lust-addled parasite. This systematic unraveling was the only poetic penance he had left himself susceptible to, and I was the merciless architect and keeper of his regenerating torment. My only regret through the entire process, if you could call it that, was my failure to capture the look on Owen's face as the final divorce papers were shoved across the table for his signature. The abject, hopeless capitulation, I committed that image to memory with savage intensity, a permanent brand searing the depth of his unforgivable transgressions into my very soul. If he had any delusions of earning leniency or a shoulder to cry on, they were emphatically snuffed in that moment. I stood impassive, muscles taut and unyielding as the granite monolith I had become, unmoved by his pitiful, shuddering pleas. After all, he had made this bed, and he would lie in it forever. As the ashes of our immolated relationship cooled and scattered to the winds, I turned to embrace my radiant future with renewed determination. Nathan and I would not merely endure in the wake of Owen's ruination. We would flourish, heroically emboldened by the sheer ferocity of my love. The next chapter, wholly devoid of my cancerous husband's toxic influence, beckoned brilliantly. With the divorce finalized and Owen permanently exiled from our lives, an incredible weight seemed to lift from my shoulders. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I could breathe easy again, unburdened by his insidious deception and selfishness poisoning the very air around me. Gone were the furtive glances over my shoulder, the gnawing doubts needling my subconscious. The pathological menace that was my former husband had been banished. In his place, stretching out ahead of Nathan and I, shone the inviting path of a fresh start, a life finally free from that emotional malignancy. My son, in particular, seemed to blossom in the weeks after Owen's departure. With his father's erratic, deflating presence no longer clouding our home, Nathan emerged a sunny, vibrant version of himself that I had feared was being slowly smothered. He laughed more, played with an unbridled joy and innocence, and seemed to walk taller, almost as if subconsciously relieved to be rid of an unseen burden. I knew he still harbored questions, childlike confusion about the intricacies of why Dad was no longer around. But I allowed those doubts to dissipate naturally through the simple pleasures of being present as his single, doting parent. Our bond deepened in ways I hadn't realized were possible, a nearness forged through the shared triumph over adversity. In many ways, I found myself rediscovering my own identity as well, reclaiming the woman I had been before the toxicity of Owen's influence took insidious hold. Gone were the feeble insecurities he had so skillfully preyed upon, replaced by an almost feral self-reliance, an unwavering confidence in my ability to nurture and provide unaided. Of course, I would be lying if I didn't admit to still harboring a vicious streak of resentment towards my ex-husband. Try as I might, I couldn't seem to fully excise him from my thoughts, my perceptions of the world now forever being filtered through the lens of his ultimate betrayal. Mundane tasks like checking the mailbox or reviewing finances seemed to dredge up visceral flashes of that sickening sense of violation and embarrassment upon realizing the full extent of his cheating and squandering. But I refused to allow those ugly feelings to corrupt the fresh, vibrant horizons stretching out before Nathan and I. If anything, they reminded me of the revitalizing decision I had made to sever that dead weight and provided Flint's striking motivation to diligently maintain our freedom lest we stumble into a backslide. As for my actual encounters with Owen, well, they were bitterly limited to polite but emotionally distanced co-parenting obligations. I could sense his desperate yearning for any shred of warmth or nostalgic connection during the frequent custody handoffs, his eyes silently pleading for an olive branch or moment of levity he had long forfeited any right to. But I had meant what I said, that bridge had been napalmed to cinders, nothing remaining to rehabilitate. After the unspeakable transgressions and indignities he had subjected me to so callously, he would forever be immediately dead to me outside of the most rudimentary procedural dealings. No amount of sniveling or feigned remorse could ever hope to erase the scars he had inflicted. So while Owen was left to wallow in the wreckage of his selfish debauchery, a ruined career, an ostracized social life, even restraining orders keeping him at a safe distance from me and his former workplace paramour, my focus remained squarely ahead on forging the brilliant futures we had so narrowly reclaimed from his morass of lies. With Ella's support and encouragement, I slowly let down my guard, began embracing all the wonderful possibilities unfurling in this new dawn of independence. One key step was resurrecting my long-ignored graphic design passion into a full-fledged career, pooling my settlements into launching a thriving online business that allowed me the perfect work-life balance as a newly minted single mother. It was deeply validating, watching my creative hunches blossom into success while remaining ever present for Nathan's needs. Almost as if the universe itself was rewarding my perseverance and sacrifice, gently restoring the dignity that Owen had so malignantly leached away. From there, it was almost frighteningly easy to let the light back into our lives, our household brimming with renewed vitality. I founded a women's support group to empower other divorcees who had faced similar trauma. We took vacations abroad, soaking in new cultures and perspectives as antidotes to Owen's provincialism. By all metrics, we were genuinely, effervescently happy in ways that had eluded us throughout that entire dark chapter score of marital imprisonment. Looking back, it was hard to believe there had been a time when the pall of Owen's toxicity had settled so insidiously over us all. My memories of that miserably wasted purgatory already felt like dissolving fever dreams, ephemeral delusions overwhelmed and exorcised by the blinding truth that had set us free. Nathan and I had been given an almost implausible second chance at living our lives to their fullest potentials, one I vowed never to squander in exchange for mere complacency or jadedness ever again. My son would grow up seeing the true depth of a matriarch's inner steel, and the infinite power that comes from making the impossible choice to stand upright and walk towards the sun. As for Owen, well, the less said of his own diminishing existence, the better. I had moved on from that stunted, ignoble chapter, devoting what precious energy remained towards cultivating the two flames now burning bright before me. My son was my shining future, but my scorched redemption was entirely my own.